What would you do if someone you loved went missing, and the authorities failed to act quickly enough to find them? What if that neglect led to their death? This is the heart-wrenching question the Marcano family had to face in the wake of their daughter Mia's disappearance. Miya Marcano, a bright, promising 19-year-old college student at Valencia College in Orlando, Florida, vanished on September 24, 2021, from her apartment at the Arden Villas complex. She had so much of life ahead of her, a young woman who had big dreams, including an art degree, a future in sports medicine, and a family that adored her until one fateful evening when she would never come home. For her family, this simple act of not returning home would set off a nightmare that none of them could have imagined. And, what would make matters worse, was the failure of those entrusted with her safety. Miya was last seen heading to her apartment after work, but within hours, her disappearance would be handled with what many consider to be gross negligence by the very authorities meant to protect her. The tragic result? Her body was found 8 days later in a remote wooded area, her hands and feet bound, and her mouth sealed with tape signs that no one could ignore. Miya's parents, heartbroken and desperate for answers, now find themselves not just mourning their daughter's death, but fighting a legal battle to hold the authorities accountable for the role their negligence played in the delay that cost her life. This story isn't just about Miya's death, it's about the broken system that failed her and so many others. Stay with us until the end, as we uncover what happened in those crucial hours and explore the fight for justice that continues to this day. Miya Marcano was just 19 years old, with a bright future ahead of her. Born on April 26, 2002, in Pembroke Pines, Florida, Miya was the daughter of Marlon Marcano, a well-known DJ, and Emma Gabrielle. She grew up surrounded by love and support from her family, particularly from her older brother, Marlon Jr. The Marcano family was incredibly close-knit, and Miya's nickname, Mimi, reflected how adored she was by those closest to her. From an early age, Miya exhibited traits that would set her apart: confidence, resilience, and ambition. Her mother often described her as smart, strong, independent, and determined to succeed in everything she did. She was not only beautiful but driven, with a keen focus on carving out her own path. Miya was a standout student at Charles Flanagan High School, where she was known for helping others and for excelling academically. After high school, Miya set her sights on college and moved to Orlando to attend Valencia College, where she was pursuing an art degree. Miya's dreams didn't stop there. She planned to eventually study sports medicine or physiotherapy to further her career. In the meantime, she balanced school with a part-time job at the Arden Villas, a student housing complex near the University of Central Florida. Miya's life seemed full of promise as she juggled academics, work, and the excitement of living independently in a new city. She rented an apartment at Arden Villas, where she was building the future she had always dreamed of. But Miya's newfound independence would soon be shattered by a man whose obsession would cut her life short. Armando Caballero, a maintenance worker at Arden Villas, was a man who could not handle rejection. He became fixated on Miya, despite her repeated refusals. At first, their interactions seemed harmless, just casual greetings and small talk. But soon, Caballero's behavior began to escalate. Caballero's advances toward Miya became increasingly persistent, making her feel uncomfortable. He started showing up at her apartment uninvited, offering to help with tasks that were not his responsibility. Miya initially declined politely, but his behavior didn't stop. Instead of taking the hint, Caballero's obsession grew. He began sending her texts, making comments that made her uncomfortable, and repeatedly asking her out. Each time she rejected him, his fixation on her only grew stronger. Eventually, Miya confided in her family and friends about the situation, explaining how her discomfort with Caballero had reached a breaking point. His behavior grew disturbing. He even offered her his life savings in exchange for her agreeing to go out with him. Miya refused every time, but the more she turned him down, the more desperate and aggressive he became. Armando's obsession was spiraling out of control, and Miya felt trapped. The question remained, how far would he go? On Friday, September 24, 2021, Mia's day seemed like any other. She had finished a shift at the leasing office at Arden Villas, preparing for a flight to Fort Lauderdale to visit her family. Miya was excited to see her loved ones and unwind after a long week of work and study. She texted her family to let them know she was heading to the airport, sharing her excitement for the trip. But that was the last message anyone would hear from her. Miya returned to her apartment to grab her suitcase, but something went terribly wrong. She never emerged. Hours passed, and her family tried reaching out to her. Texts, phone calls, and social media messages went unanswered. It was completely out of character for Miya to disappear without any word, especially when she had been so excited about the trip. As the hours stretched on, her family's concern turned to panic. By 9:30 p.m., with no word from Miya, her mother, Emma, contacted the Orange County Sheriff's Office to request a wellness check at Mia's apartment. The situation, which seemed to be spiraling out of control, was about to take a darker turn. When a deputy arrived at Arden Villas, the apartment complex was eerily quiet. He knocked several times, but there was no answer. Eventually, one of Mia's roommates arrived and let the officer inside, where disturbing signs immediately raised alarm bells. Mia's door was unlocked, but something was blocking it from the inside. The dresser pushed up against the door, as if someone had tried to keep someone out. The officer peered through the window and noticed something even more concerning: jewelry scattered on the floor and red stains on a pillow, suggesting that something violent had taken place. Mia's roommate confirmed that Miya had texted her earlier that afternoon, saying she was heading to the airport, but now Miya was nowhere to be found. The officer then inquired about anyone in Mia's life who might want to harm her, and that's when her roommate mentioned the name of Armando Caballero. Miya had confided in her about Caballero's harassment in the days before her disappearance. His name now became a critical part of the investigation. But as the officer pieced the evidence together, one key issue became clear: Armando wasn't easy to find. As the investigation stalled and the hours stretched into the early morning, Mia's family's frustration grew. They had waited for answers, but the authorities seemed too relaxed about the situation. Feeling increasingly helpless, Mia's mother, Emma, and her relatives decided to take matters into their own hands. They arrived at Arden Villas in the early hours, hoping to find someone who could offer more answers. It was around 4:00 a.m. when Armando arrived at the complex. He claimed to be looking for Miya, but this raised immediate red flags. No one had yet publicly acknowledged that she was missing, and no official alerts had been issued. Why was Armando there at such an odd hour? His presence seemed suspicious. When confronted by Mia's family, Armando gave vague answers about seeing Miya earlier that day, but his behavior only deepened their suspicion. The more they questioned him, the more his story seemed to unravel. And yet, despite their growing concerns, the authorities had done little to investigate further. This section continues to build on the narrative of growing suspicion around Armando Caballero, the deepening frustration of Mia's family, and the subsequent events that led to the discovery of critical evidence. We'll move toward the turning point in the next section, where the investigation finally picks up steam, and we explore the devastating discovery of Mia's body. As the hours stretched on, Mia's family grew increasingly desperate. Despite the authorities' lack of urgency, they knew they couldn't let Armando slip away. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, and they couldn't ignore the growing suspicion that Armando had more to do with Mia's disappearance than anyone realized. After their unsettling encounter with him, Mia's family decided to take matters into their own hands. They began to follow Armando discreetly, hoping to uncover more information about his movements and, perhaps, his connection to Mia's disappearance. Their patience was about to pay off. As they followed him, they saw something that made their hearts race. Armando was unloading items from his car. At first, it seemed innocent enough. But then they saw something that immediately caught their attention. A pink blanket. It was unmistakably Mia's. The same blanket she had used just days before, the same one they had seen her with during family visits and casual moments. But that wasn't all. Alongside the blanket were gloves and a black backpack, items that seemed too specific to be mere coincidence. Mia's family immediately recognized them. They had seen these items in her apartment, and now they were in Armando's car. The realization hit them like a cold wave. These were key pieces of evidence, and they were sitting right under their noses. The family exchanged uneasy looks. How had these items ended up in Armando's possession? The implications were clear. These were physical objects that could connect him directly to Miya. But despite this undeniable evidence, Armando was still free, walking around as if nothing had happened. Mia's family immediately contacted the authorities, hoping they would take this new lead seriously. But once again, they found themselves waiting. The frustration mounted. How could the authorities still be dragging their feet when the pieces were so clearly in place? Mia's family was left with no choice but to continue pushing for justice on their own. The story took an even more chilling turn when Mia's family spotted something else in Armando's car, something that immediately sent shivers down their spines. Among the items they saw was a yellow box cutter. This small, seemingly insignificant tool suddenly became the most important piece of evidence in the case. The box cutter, with its sharp, deadly blade, could easily have been used to threaten or harm someone. In that moment, Mia's family realized that they were dealing with something far more sinister than a case of unrequited love. They were dealing with a man who had the potential for violence, and now they had the proof to back it up. The family quickly documented the box cutter and the other items, knowing that this was crucial evidence that could potentially link Armando to Mia's disappearance. This was the final piece of the puzzle. Armando's connection to Mia's death was no longer a matter of suspicion, it was undeniable. At this point, Mia's family felt like they were fighting a battle on two fronts. They were battling the slow-moving wheels of law enforcement and the terrifying possibility that Miya might never be found. But as the investigation intensified, something crucial happened. The FBI became involved. The federal agency's involvement was a turning point in the case. With the added resources, expertise, and urgency that the FBI brought to the table, Mia's family finally felt like they had a fighting chance. The FBI's leadership meant that Mia's case would no longer be treated as just another missing persons report. It was now a high-priority case with a clear focus. For the first time in days, Mia's family felt a glimmer of hope. With the FBI leading the charge, they knew that someone was finally taking their daughter's disappearance seriously. The family worked tirelessly to spread Mia's image across social media, print flyers, and contact anyone who might have information. They knew they had to leave no stone unturned. The community rallied behind them, offering support and assistance in any way they could. Volunteers helped with the search efforts. Social media exploded with posts about Miya, and the pressure was mounting on authorities to act quickly. The Marcano family was fighting to bring their daughter home, but they had one looming question: would they find her alive, or was the worst yet to come? After nearly a week of intense searching, a breakthrough finally came. On October 2, 2021, authorities received a tip that led them to a wooded area near Timberscone, a neighborhood known for its rough reputation. It was a place that people often went missing without a trace, an area few ventured into, but one that would ultimately become the site of Miya Marcano's tragic end. When the search team arrived and began combing through the dense underbrush, they uncovered something that sent shockwaves through the community. Miya's body. Her hands and feet were bound with duct tape, and her mouth was taped shut. This was no accident, no random disappearance. This was something far darker. This was a brutal crime. the discovery of Miya's body was a crushing blow to her family, confirming their worst fears. For days, they had clung to the hope that Miya might be alive, that they could still bring her home. But now, that hope was shattered. The grief was overwhelming. Miya's aunt, while fighting to stay strong for the rest of the family, shared a message of resilience. "We're not giving up. We're not going to stop until we have answers." But despite the strength in those words, the reality of Miya's death was impossible to deny. The authorities were unable to immediately determine how Miya had died due to the advanced decomposition of her body, but the manner in which she was found, her hands and feet bound, her mouth taped, was unmistakably violent. It was clear that Miya had not just vanished, she had been murdered. The investigation would continue, but the pain for Miya's family had already reached an unbearable level. With Miya's body found, the focus shifted back to the investigation. But Miya's family, now grappling with the reality of their daughter's death, was more frustrated than ever. They had tried to get answers from the start, but it seemed that the apartment complex, Arden Villas, had failed to act when it was most needed. The lack of security, the failure to take Miya's concerns seriously, and the fact that someone with a history like Armando Caballero was allowed access to the complex were all major red flags that had been ignored. The Marcano family, feeling betrayed by the complex that should have protected Miya, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Arden Villas. They argued that the management had failed in their duty to protect their daughter when they allowed a man like Caballero access to her apartment. The family's legal battle was not just about seeking compensation. It was about holding the apartment complex accountable for its role in Miya's tragic death. If Arden Villas had acted sooner, if they had responded to Miya's warnings about Caballero, things might have been different. But as the investigation dug deeper into Caballero's history, it became clear that the apartment complex had failed to see the danger, and their negligence may have played a role in Miya's death. As the investigation continued, more troubling details about Armando Caballero's past began to surface. His history of harassing women, his disturbing interactions with Miya, and his access to her apartment all painted a terrifying picture of a man who had been a threat all along. Yet no one had taken steps to stop him before Miya's death. The Marcano family, still reeling from their loss, was left with one undeniable truth. Miya's death could have been prevented. The failure to act by those in positions of responsibility, the apartment complex, law enforcement, and even some of Miya's peers, allowed a dangerous situation to escalate into tragedy. Now, Miya's family was fighting for justice, and they weren't going to stop until they had the answers they deserved. As the Marcano family continues their pursuit of justice, the case has sparked a broader conversation about the responsibility of apartment management and law enforcement to protect residents. The failures in Miya's case raise crucial questions. Should the apartment complex be held accountable for the negligence that allowed Armando Caballero to remain in the building? Could Miya's life have been saved if law enforcement had acted with more urgency, or if the management had responded to her complaints about Caballero's behavior? These are the questions the Marcano family continues to ask, even as they face the painful reality that Miya's life was cut short. Miya's legacy has become a symbol of the need for reform, both in how missing persons cases are handled and how vulnerable individuals, especially women, are treated. The fight for justice continues, and Miya's family remains determined to ensure that her death was not in vain. What do you think? Could Miya's life have been saved if those responsible had acted sooner? Should the apartment complex and law enforcement be held accountable for their failures? We want to hear your thoughts. Share your opinions in the comments below. If Miya's story moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more true crime stories that examine the impact of systemic